Hello again, everybody. How you doing? Sasan Mirkarimi here, managing partner with Equity Legal and general counsel with Big Block Realty. Today, we're joining you for another really cool and exciting topic for our legal training. This one's more of a update to a pretty game-changing legislation that just got passed. So it's a new one, and you've probably heard it in your circles. It was recently, just passed in September. In California by Gavin Newsom, and that is SB9, the California Housing Opportunity and More Efficiency, or as they call it, the HOME Act. You've heard people throwing around the term SB9 and SB10. It's been on the news. It's a big deal, and that's why we decided to do this training. This is really not designed as a full-blown training on how to navigate this new law. It's really just to bring it to the forefront and provide you with just kind of the awareness of what's going on, and we'll talk about how this can affect what you guys are doing as agents in your transactions. So why are we talking about SB9? Well, SB9 pretty much eliminates single-family zoning as it exists in California. So it's a pretty big development. It really, I believe, it's intended to solve our housing density crisis here in the state of California, and I believe it's going to create more opportunity for development, which potentially means more activity, more sales. At the very least, it's something that you can throw in, for your investor clients or mainly your clients that hold different properties, and it affects their rights. It affects your rights for properties you own. And overall, I think it's going to create a little bit of a boom in more development, but not necessarily coming from the big developers, but actually from the homeowners themselves. And I remember seeing one big headline when this was passed, and it said, changing the homeowners into home builders. So let's get to it. SB9 was signed September 16th, 2021. And the official law will go into effect January 1st, 2022. And it really does two major things for single-family resident zoning. Number one, it allows for urban lot splits. And number two, it allows for duplex lot conversions, which means you have one house and you get to put another one on top of it. And as I said, the end of single-family zoning. Obviously, before this law went into effect, there are limited areas within each local municipality that have to be zone specific to be able to add more than one unit. This essentially gets rid of that and allows much more flexibility in being able to either split the lot or build a duplex on an existing single-family lot. So today, I'm not going to get into all the details. I'm just trying to hit the high points, kind of the approval process, what you can and cannot do, certain limitations on how you can rent a property like this once you've taken advantage of the ability to do the split or build a duplex, etc. First, I'd like to start with the approval process. For lot splits under SB9 and duplex conversions, a local municipality must ministerially approve such an action. That's a legal term of art, but basically it just means they have to loosely let it happen. So whereas before, your local municipality is going to be challenging and there's going to go through a whole zoning review when you're trying to do anything to your property, that no longer can happen under SB9. They need to use objective standards to know ahead of time when submitting their plans, and those should be approved. And most importantly, from a Sequa standpoint, and that is the Environmental Quality Act, you can't get blocked by Sequa. That is one of the biggest kind of burdens or impingements on development is the environmental regulations and requirements of clearing, in addition to coastal, which we'll get into. But it's a big development here. With respect to zoning, the main kind of requirement to be approved is that it must be single-family resident zoning, so that's easy. And it has to be one lot and one house. So it's got to be R1 on a zoning map, and it has to be a single parcel to be able to take advantage of the SB9 benefits to either build the duplex or split the lot. Okay, a couple other quick highlight points you have to consider here with respect to any limitations. In order for the property to qualify, it cannot be any of the following. Number one, subject to affordable housing. Number 2, have a historical designation. Number 3, designated a high fire zone. Or number 4, be a property that is currently tenant occupied or occupied within the last 3 years. Obviously, these are big restraints, but you can tell why they exist, because the whole goal of this is to help the housing crisis, and so we don't want to get rid of affordable housing, so that's pretty clear. Historic has always been an issue here in California. They protect historic designations. That's anything that's been designated historic. It's typically something that was built, 1965 or earlier, but there's other details that I'm not going to get into today, but just be aware. If it's in a fire zone, obviously with the large number of wildfires, there are designated zones now in California, and they're not going to allow this development in those zones. And obviously tenant occupancy is crucial. You can't kick out a tenant to take advantage of this, potentially. That's TBD too. I'm sure there's going to be different adjustments to that as this thing gets litigated once it's enacted in January. Okay, another crucial thing, which I think is very interesting, and I think a lot of people, naturally when you heard about this, it's like, oh, here we go, another law is passed to help the developers, right? They're just going to go buy up all these single-family parcels, and they're going to develop them and add multiple units or split them and add 4 units under the duplex portion. Well, guess what? They thought about that, and the way they're trying to prevent that, and I say trying because the developers and their lawyers are going to get creative and they're going to try and find the nuances. But until then, there's a creative kind of requirement that they've included in order to pass through and take advantage of SB9. The owner of the lot has to provide what's called a lot split affidavit, and that means they must sign an affidavit that the 3 years after the approval for the lot split, they won't, for example, they're going to be agreeing that one of the units will be their primary residence for the next 3 years. They cannot assemble neighboring parcels, so they can't go get another parcel next to it and try to connect it. And they can't work with another neighbor to try and create like a little community of their own, for example. So obviously that is put in place to prevent developers from going in and buying these neighboring parcels and then trying to take advantage of the law. It's not intended for them. It's intended for your average Joe Schmo or your mid-sized, middle-income citizen who owns a single-family residence and really wants to maximize the use of that property to provide more housing. One question that a lot of people are going to ask is, okay, well, if I can do this and I can expand the number of units, can they be rentals? Can I make money off of this by adding a duplex or splitting the lot? The answer is yes, to a certain extent. The local agencies are going to have to require that any of the units that are rented out must be rented out for 30 days or more. What does that mean? No more short-term rentals, no Airbnbs. That's out the window. You can't engage in this so that you can offer short-term housing and Airbnb. So that kind of takes away that portion of it. But still, that's pretty cool, right? Because this does add an income stream to someone who may not even be an investor or someone that's not looking to engage in rental real estate. They don't have to go beyond the 4 corners of their own property. They can engage in the lot split or just build another duplex right on top of their property, so long as they meet all the other qualifications, and they can even rent that other unit out as long as it's a term of over 30 days. Under the bill itself, there's really multiple different combinations of how you can take advantage of the spirit of the law, and we'll go over that quickly. Number 1, you can have a lot with one house sitting on it and take advantage of the duplex conversion. What does that mean? You take one structure, you add a duplex on top of it, you don't split the lot, and you could add another ADU, and there's no affidavit needed to be signed. That's important because the major way of getting multiple units is by doing the lot split portion. But just by adding the additional unit, you do not need to have the affidavit that's intended to prevent the developers from coming in. Now, the second portion, or second way you can kind of set this up under the law, is the lot split. The way this works is it cuts the lot in half. You're allowed to build another home and then have 2 separate parcels that you can sell individually. You must sign the 3-year affidavit we discussed. And it can be either 50-50 or 60-40 as how the lot is split itself. And the minimum lot size, unless the city ends up allowing smaller, right? So keep note of that, is 1,200 square feet. So in order to do the lot split, the minimum lot size is 1,200 square feet, which is actually not a lot. Most lots, I mean, are going to meet that threshold. So that tells you this is going to kind of apply across the board here for single-family residences. So the interesting thing there in the bill is that subject to local limitations, it's interesting to see, and we'll kind of touch on, how each municipality is going to address, requiring even more restrictions on the lot size requirement. Now we have a lot split and a duplex conversion. So that's interesting. So you could split the lot and do a duplex, which means you can get a total of, I believe, 4 units now out of a single parcel. And the way that works is you have to have a maximum of 2 units on each lot, or you can do 2 in 1. Really cool. So you can stick with 3, or you can add 2 duplexes on each split lot. Again, huge ramifications. You're taking a single lot now and you're basically creating multifamily housing on a single parcel. So this is so big, and it's just going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out locally and as more people have time to actually attack it or interpret it. So let's dig into the bill itself, some of them, the details. As I said earlier, I use the word, ministerial consideration. That basically means the housing development containing no more than 2 single-family residents with single-family residential zoning. There should be no objection, and no discretionary review or hearing is required, which is usually a big hurdle in trying to push things through on the local level when trying to develop a lot. There is still approval required by the local agency. But like I said earlier, Sequa's restrictions do not apply. So you don't have to go through that extra time period of environmental impact review. And the local agency is required to provide all steps and standards to apply and be approved for this ordinance, so long as you apply with the requirements. A couple other limitations: no demolition or alteration of any of the following. Anything that's subject to a covenant, ordinance, or law that restricts rent to levels affordable to persons, affordable housing, tenant occupancy within the last 3 years, and historical designation. Now let's move to the actual qualifying criteria. As I said earlier, each lot must be at least 1,200 square feet. And ultimately, the split will result in 2 new lots of approximately equal size. You can go all the way to 60-40 or right down the middle, 50-50. The split does not involve demolition or alteration of affordable housing, rent-controlled housing, housing that was withdrawn from rent within the last 15 years, or housing occupied by a tenant, as we said, in the past 3 years. Again, they're really going to protect their affordable. They're not going to get rid of that. They're not going to let you affect tenants. This is really just someone that's living on their own property and wants to maximize its highest and best use and allow more housing for people that want to get into housing in restricted areas. Obviously, the lot has to be single-family zoning. It has to be a single-family resident. It must be in an urbanized area and or an urban cluster, or within a city that has an urbanized area or urban cluster as identified by the U.S. Census Bureau. That's going to be huge, right? Because that's going to determine the areas where this can, potentially be barred. Most cities are going to be considered urban, but you have to defer to that definition, and it's going to be interesting to see if how that plays out. But in theory, this is basically every urban and suburban city in California, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity. The original lot may not have been established through a prior SB9 lot split, so you can't do this a prior SB9 lot split and then come in again and try to do it again, obviously. Neither the owner nor anyone acting in concert with the owner previously subdivided an adjacent parcel through an SB9 lot split. Okay, so that basically refers to what I talked about, the neighboring lot. You can't go around and do it on one property next door and then take advantage of the second property to basically create like this multi-family planned community. That's not the spirit of the law. And the approval is by right, so the likelihood of automatic approval, so long as it does not conflict with the zoning standards or the qualifying criteria I just went through, it's going to go through. So it seems like this is going to be, really pushed through easily, barring any challenge by the local municipalities. Now, one of the biggest things we said was the standards of which they're going to be required to approve these designations or lot splits on the local level. The standards for the lot splits, they must be objective only. Under SB9, local agencies may only impose objective zoning standards objective subdivision standards and objective design standards on an eligible project. And even then, only to the extent that the standards do not physically preclude the construction of 2 units of at least 800 square feet. That right there is huge, right? So, I mean, it's really saying you can't come up with your own criteria. It's all based on objective standards, and as long as they physically can fall under each lot resulting in at least 800 square feet, then they really got to push the project through. We'll keep an eye on that, obviously. In spirit, sounds amazing. We'll see how it looks in practice. Limited parking. Local agencies may require only 1 off-street parking space per unit. So none if the site is close to a transit or car share vehicle location. This is crucial because one of the biggest things that came up was, what about parking, right? Like that might come up with neighboring landowners saying, hey, they're taking up all the parking, or you don't have room to provide for parking. Well, it sounds like you only have to provide one off-street parking spot, and maybe up to as low as 0 if you're in a transit authority area, which obviously you'd have to go look up. But at least here in San Diego, we have a lot of areas that are considered, in that transit zone where potentially you're not even going to require to provide parking for that additional lot. And again, another interesting thing that we see in the bill is really the limited grounds to deny. Again, we talked about the objective standards, but in the law itself, it says that local agency may only deny a qualifying SB9 local lot split if the building official finds that the resulting housing development project would have a specific adverse impact on public health and safety or the physical environment, and there's no feasible satisfactory mitigation. So again, those are a lot of big terms of art there, and a creative lawyer might be able to tackle that and try to block the development. Because again, as you can tell, there are a lot of communities that are getting pissed off about this and don't want this development, even though the state and even those local municipalities will need it. But it seems like it's just, hey, it's all systems go as long as you're not, meeting the standard of significant health impact, right? And that's going to be hard to prove, but we'll keep an eye on it. All right, so we talked about the lot splits. Let's talk about the 2-unit development or duplex component of SB9. What are the qualifications? Similar to the lot splits, it's got to be single-family residence zoning. It's got to be located within an urban area, as we defined earlier. And the project does not involve demolition or altering of affordable housing, rent-controlled housing, or housing that was withdrawn from rent within the last 15 years, or as we said, with the lot splits, identical, no housing that had tenant occupancy in the past 3 years. Also, the project does not involve demolition of more than 25% of the existing exterior walls of an existing dwelling, unless the local agency chooses to allow it. So they're just kind of passing the onus to them. If you're going to push it through, go ahead. Or the site has not been occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years. So there is a little bit of a structural limitation to be aware of. And again, it can't be historical designation, just like the lot split. Okay, one thing to monitor, and you guys might be wondering is, okay, well, how does this affect California's already recent ADU laws or JDU laws, the ability to add an accessory dwelling unit to an existing parcel? That was like the big excitement from a year ago, where people started really investing in adding these ADUs and zoning for ADUs on their properties. Well, SB9 creates 2 narrow exceptions from the general requirements that local agencies allow ADUs and JDUs ministerially. And that first, when a lot is both created by SB9 lot split and developed with an SB9 2-unit development, a local agency does not need to allow an ADU or a JDU. All right, so let's come back to that. This is one of those things that potentially limits the full development and people really taking full advantage of this law. What does that mean? If the property was both split, so you got one parcel into 2, so you got 2 parcels, and then they also took advantage of a 2-unit development on each. So now you've got 4 units, right, from a single parcel. Then they're not saying you can't do an ADU or JDU. All they're doing in the bill is saying that a local agency can basically not allow an ADU or JDU if they determine they don't want to do that. Now, if that language does not exist on the local level, guess what that means? You are talking about potentially a situation. You take a single lot, you split it in 2, you add a duplex on each, that's 4 units, and you get a JDU and ADU on each. So that's potentially 8 units from a single parcel. I'm not telling you that's going to be the case, but we got to keep an eye on this, and this is why this is huge. I'm sure you know my real estate agents out there, you can understand the the exciting opportunity here and the rush to get into certain properties. If you start finding certain local municipalities, let's say San Diego comes out and says, hey, we're not going to limit that. Well, there's now a true big value in larger lots where you could potentially split and you meet all the requirements and potentially get 8 units on a single property, which is just unbelievable, maximizing the value for the owner of that lot. A second limitation, or if you want to call it that, is that a local agency does not need to allow an ADU or JDU on a lot if there's already 2 units of any kind on that lot. So kind of similar limiting exercise, again, putting it in the onus of the local municipality. All right, so we talked a little bit earlier about the flexibility and not having to worry about Sequa. So let's talk about that. With respect to Sequa, as we said, because approval under SB9 is what's called ministerial, the California Environmental Quality Act, or Sequa, does not apply. So the bill creates a new statutory exemption for an ordinance adopted to be implemented under SB9. So but it does not necessarily do so with respect to the Coastal Act. So anything that falls under the Coastal Act does apply, but the local agency is not required to hold a public hearing on a coastal development permit for an SB9 approval. As you may know, one of the biggest drawdowns to trying to develop lots that are subject to the Coastal Act is the delays caused by these hearings and the challenges by the local community and just regular Joe Schmo neighbors. Well, it looks like it is going to be subject to Coastal Act approval, but they're not going to require a hearing. Very interesting. Let's see how that plays out. There is one exception. The local agency just can't hold a public hearing on a comprehensive development plan, whatever that means. I don't know the answer to that. TBD. So that's basically the main high points of kind of the main spirit of the law, broken down into lot splits, duplex, kind of limitations on, being able to, or qualifying criteria of being able to take advantage of it. Obviously, historical is a no-go. Previously occupied by tenants is a no-go. The effect on short-term, rentals. Obviously, you can rent the property out, but you can't do it for, Airbnbs and short-term rentals. Those are some of the main things that stand out. But of course, we haven't covered everything because, again, this is a very new legislation. It's not even enacted yet. I mean, it's the law's been enacted, but it's not going to be enforced or actually be available for people to apply for SB9 lot splits or duplexes until January of 2022. So just keep an eye on that. On the local level, I can't speak to any other municipality, but we've kind of kept our ears open with San Diego. And the current status is that per the planning department, San Diego will begin review of SB9 bill in January 2022. So they're not even going to consider it or talk about it and put anything out until January 2022 when they start actually getting requests. From January, it'll take about a couple months to draft rules and procedures. So we are expecting by March or April of 2022, you'll have your first kind of guidelines or issued by San Diego, so that by the planning department, so we can see if they're going to take that more restrictive approach. TBD, no guarantees. It's going to be a fun thing to follow, and I'm very excited to do another update on this in about 3 to 4 months after we've seen some developments kind of all throughout the state. So stay tuned. I hope this is helpful. Feel free to do your own research as well. This is an evolving, big, industry-wide change with respect to the density crisis and also the ability for pretty much anybody to take advantage of more development on their existing properties. So stay tuned. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.